Monday the 12th of February 2024, and in this video we're going to be going through 15 example questions for the TfL SERU Assessment. These are the official format up-to-date questions for 2024. Before we take a look at the questions, I just want to go through an overview of the assessment and what you should expect for those of you who aren't familiar with the test. So the test, of course, is a computer-based test and it lasts 45 minutes. Now, previously, in the last year, the questions that you would get would always be 37. Now, many months ago, this was changed. So now, you will not necessarily get exactly 37 questions. You may get 36 questions sometimes. And previously, you would get 18 multiple choice questions, 17 fill in the blank or drag and fill questions if you want to call them that, and finally you'd get 2 reading and understanding questions. Now, the split of the questions has also changed just slightly. It's no longer an exact amount of each of the different question types that you will get. So, for the reading and understanding question, sometimes students have seen 3, 4 of these questions come up in their test. Most of the time it's still 2, but sometimes you can see up to 4. For the fill in the blank questions, students are getting sometimes between 15 to 17 questions. Okay, as for the multiple choice questions, in general, most people are getting 18. But just to make you aware that whereas previously these would be the exact number of questions that you would expect, it's now a bit more flexible in terms of what you're going to get. The pass mark is still 60%. So let's get started with the questions. This is the first question type, which is probably the most challenging. This is the fill in the blank or the drag and fill question type, which most people struggle with. In this question, you're given a sentence or a couple of sentences, maybe a short paragraph, and there are some words missing. What you have to do is to complete the sentence by dragging the correct answers into the gaps. At the beginning of a question, you'll always see the same instructions. The instructions simply read, please complete the following passage by selecting a word or phrase and dragging it into the space in the sentence. Any unused words must be dragged into the red box before moving on to the next question. So this will come up in every fill in the blank question. It's simply the instructions. You don't need to always read them. They will not change. The instructions will be the same. So first I'm going to demonstrate to you how the software for this question works so you can get familiarized with how to answer the question. After that, we'll then look at how you figure out the correct answers, okay? So for now, I'm just going to demonstrate to you how to move around the options and what buttons you need to use. So you've got always 6 options here and you've got 3 blanks. This will always be the case, okay? What you want to do is to select the option that you think is correct by clicking on it, dragging it towards the empty space, and then letting go. You do the same for the other options. So click on it, drag it, and let go into the empty space until you've filled in those 3 gaps. The remainder of the incorrect options you have to drag into this red box here, always. And then in this way, your question is complete, and after that, you should move on to the next question. Now we're going to take a look at how you would figure out the correct answers for these fill-in-the-blank questions. Fill-in-the-blank questions test your understanding of the rules in the driver's handbook, as well as your understanding of English grammar and spelling. Okay, so for the grammar and spelling, there are 5 specific rules that you need to learn and be aware of to answer the questions correctly. Similar words, capital letters, an versus a, singular versus plural nouns, and subject-verb agreement. Most of the fill-in-the-blank questions are going to test your understanding of these rules. So as we go through these examples, I'm going to highlight to you where you need to have an understanding of similar words, or where you need to have an understanding of capital letters, or when you need to know when to use an versus a. The best way to learn these rules is to take this free online course. It is completely free and it will take you through those 5 rules with video tutorials, as well as official format example SERU questions, so that you're able to learn the rules, and then any fill-in-the-blank questions that you come across, because you know the rules, you will be able to answer them. Okay, so now back to answering the fill-in-the-blank questions. So one of the things you will always notice is from your 6 options, you will have 3 pairs. What I mean by that is you will have 3 sets of couples. Now, 2 options will always be similar to each other. That's a couple. So must be except, may be exempt. They're very similar. Driver license, pilot license. Aviation authorities, aviation authorities. Okay? Now, what you have to do is you have to decide which of the 2 options is correct in that couple. Okay? So here, you something from supplying a medical form. Which of these seems to make sense? You may be exempt, you must be except. One of those 2 should go into here. Now, you must be except versus you may be exempt. Here you're being tested on similar words. You must be except doesn't make sense. The correct word is exempt. Okay, so here you're being tested on similar words and knowing the difference between them. So the correct answer is you may be exempt, and we're going to drag the other one into here. You may be exempt from supplying a medical form if you have a valid, current driver license or pilot license. Now, which of the 2 is it? So remember I said fill in the blank questions test your understanding of spelling and grammar, but also test your understanding of the rules in the handbook. So to know which of the 2 is correct, driver license versus pilot license, we would need to refer to the information in the handbook, which we would have memorized before taking the test. And the information for that question is in section 1 of the handbook under the topic of medical conditions. So here, what it's saying is you may be exempt from supplying a medical form if you have a valid current pilot's license issued by the Joint Aviation Authorities. So now here we know that the correct answer is not driver license, but pilot license, and it is issued by the Joint Aviation Authorities. Now if we take a look at the 2 options we have here, both of them say aviation authorities. So which of the 2 is correct? And what is the difference? We can see that the only difference is that here you have capital letters in the aviation authorities, and here you have lowercase letters. So how do we know which of the 2 to use? Remember those rules that we were talking about for grammar and spelling? So here you're being tested on capital letters, and there are specific rules when it comes to what words should be capitalized and which words should not be capitalized. If you take that free course, you'll get access to this cheat sheet. The cheat sheet explains to you the rule. The rule says that you should capitalize proper nouns. The first letter should always be capitalized. Okay? And so here you have a list of all of the proper nouns in the handbook. And if you familiarize yourself with these, then whenever you come across fill in the blank questions where you have 2 options, one of the options doesn't have capital letters and the other one does, you will know whether it should be capitalized or not. So for example, London City Airport must be capitalized. It's a proper noun, as is Heathrow Airport, as is PHV, Authorized Vehicle Area. London, English, European Union, all of these are proper nouns, which when you see them as options in the fill-in-the-blank questions, make sure to use the version with the capital letters. This is a very common rule that they test you on in the fill-in-the-blank questions. The same goes for congestion charge, ultra-low emission zone, City of London Police, Islamic, Sharia Council, Muslims. Okay? And here are the rest of them. Amongst them, we see Joint Aviation Authorities. So that means that we would definitely use this version, because this is not correct. There's also another thing that gives away the answer here. If you look at the word before the gap, joint, you can see that that itself is also capitalized. And of course it's capitalized because Joint Aviation Authorities, the joint is also capitalized. So it wouldn't make sense to have the J capital for that word and the rest lowercase. So pay close attention. But again, the best way to answer these questions is to learn the rules, those 5 rules, and the course covers everything, including all of the examples that you need to know. Here's another question. Section 170 of the Equality Act seems to be the most reasonable answer here, and we have two options in the pair. Again, we have the Equality Act with some capital letters and the Equality Act with lower letters. So how would we know which of these two is correct? Again, we would be able to refer to the list of proper nouns that are capitalized. Is the Equality Act a proper noun? And we can see that indeed it is, the Equality Act. And the words that are capitalized are equality and act, but the isn't. So the proper noun is Equality Act. So here we would use this option, because this option, both the E and the A are not capitalized. Very simple. Once you get familiarized with all those examples, the capital letter rule is one of the more easy rules that you can pick up marks on. So section 170 of the Equality Act says that PHV drivers must accept passengers with assistance dogs, and must allow and must allows. Which of the two is correct? Okay, here we have PHV drivers, meaning more than one driver. Drivers in general it's speaking about, so it's plural. Okay, the subject of the sentence here is plural, PHV drivers. So the verb, which is allow, must be also plural. Now, a plural verb is going to be without an S. So this might sound a bit confusing, but again, this is covered in the course with examples. If you have a singular subject, use a singular verb. Singular verbs end in S. If you have a plural subject, like we do here, so drivers, that's a plural subject, we use a plural verb which doesn't end in an S. So here we would say must allow. Drivers must allow. The assistance dog to sit in the footwell or sit of the footwell. This one's pretty straightforward. We say sit in the footwell. We never say sit of. Okay, let's take a look at this question. If there are something, drivers' right to live and work in the UK, what could that be? If there are restrictions, okay, if there are restrictions, so now we have restrictions on a driver's right or restrictions on an driver's right. Which of the two is correct, and how would we know? So this is one of the other rules that will help you to understand these questions. It's when to use an versus a, and it's quite a straightforward rule. Basically, if the noun or the word that comes after a or an begins with a vowel, you would use an. So you can say an apple, an egg, an image, an orange, an umbrella. But you wouldn't say a apple, a egg, a image, a orange. That's incorrect. Grammatically, that's incorrect. So you would say a box, a car, a dog, a friend, because all of these begin with consonants and not vowels. Okay, so these are the vowels. These are all the vowels in the English language. If this seems a little bit confusing to you, don't worry. Take the course. The video explains it in a lot more detail and simplifies it for you with examples. So, back to our question. Here we've got drivers. So is it an drivers or a drivers? Well, drivers begins with a D. D is not a vowel, so we wouldn't say an. We would say a. If there are restrictions on a driver's right to live and work in the UK, TfL will add what? TfL will add a appropriate condition or an appropriate condition. Which of the two would be correct? Again, it's testing that rule of an versus a. Is it a appropriate or an appropriate condition? Think about what we said. If you have a word that begins with a vowel, and the vowels are, as we know, A, E, I, O, or U, then we have to use an. So here, we would say an appropriate condition on the license. In particular, if you are in the UK on a student visa or an student visa. So this question again is testing us on the rule of a versus an. Student begins with an S, so we wouldn't say an student, we would say a student visa. So those are the correct answers for this question. If something is made against you, if a serious complaints or for serious complaint, which of the two is correct? So the difference is that complaints has an S here, and complaint doesn't have an S here. So do we say a serious complaints, or do we say a serious complaint? This one should be straightforward for most people, because even saying it, we should be able to tell which of the two sounds correct. So it's if a serious complaint is made against you. Okay? And this rule here is a singular versus plural nouns rule that you will be able to cover in the course. And simply, it says that if we say a, then whenever we say a, we can't then have s at the end of the word. So we don't say a dogs or a cars or a books. We say a book, a car, a dog. Okay? And there are loads of examples that are covered here, but you can look at that in detail in the course. Here we're just going to run through these example questions. So, or if there are a number of complaint or number of complaints. Okay, so we're saying number. Number indicates that it's plural, there's more than one. If there's more than one of something, we need to put an S at the end of a noun because it's plural. So if there are a number of complaints, or there appears to be a pattern of poor behavior, and all the ways or all the way. All obviously means more than one thing. When we say all the cars, or all the phones, or all the pens, we're talking about plural objects, more than one object. So therefore, we want to have an S at the end of the noun. It's that same rule, the rule of singular versus plural nouns, that's going to be covered in the free course. So here we know the answer should be all the ways. So something and standards for licensing, and TfL sets requirements and standards, or TfL set requirements and standards. So the difference between these two options is set versus set. Okay, TfL is the subject here. We're talking about TfL. They are the person who's doing the thing. What are they doing? They are setting. Are we going to say TfL sets or TfL set? Now this is a bit tricky because grammatically speaking, both of these could be correct technically speaking. TfL, if you think about it, is made up of different departments, different staff members, different sub-organizations. So there are many parts to TfL, okay? But at the same time, TfL is also one organization. It's one single entity. So do we consider it as a plural subject or as a singular subject? How do we know? Well, like I said, one of the ways to know is to refer to the handbook when it comes to finding out which option is correct in the fill-in-the-blank questions. So if we look at the handbook, that references and talks about standards and licensing. If you refer to the handbook, you will find that it says TfL sets requirements and standards. Okay, so here we know that the answer is TfL sets requirements and standards for licensing, and is also responsible or are also responsible. Which of the two is correct? So TfL sets requirements and standards for licensing and is also responsible or are also responsible. We can see that they say is also responsible. So TfL sets requirements and standards for licensing and is also responsible. So the correct answer is. Also responsible for making sure that licensees follow the law. We works closely or we work closely. Which of the two is correct? Well, it's quite easy to tell that we always say we work closely. But if you want to understand why that's the case, why that's correct, is again subject-verb agreement. The subject is we. We is the subject of the sentence. We is plural. The verb is work. Now, the verb must also be plural because subject and verbs should always be in agreement. If you have a plural subject, it takes a plural verb. So we would say, we work closely with the taxi and private hire trades. So here obviously we is referring to TfL. This passage is written by TfL about TfL. You can sometimes see what type of something provides by looking at the color of the jacket it is wearing? What kind of assistance a dog provides? So which of those two would be correct? An dog or a dog? So this is testing the rule again of an versus a. It's quite a straightforward one. We would say assistance a dog provides by looking at the collar of the jacket it is wearing. Remember though that a assistance dog may not always wear, or an assistance dog may not always wear. So this one is a bit tricky because we have assistance. It does begin with an A. And the rule is that if you have a word beginning with an A, the word before it, if it's going to be an or a, it has to be an, because we wouldn't say a assistance. It begins with a vowel, therefore, that noun, the word before it, has to be an. That's an assistance dog, may not always wear an jacket or a jacket. Which of the two is correct? Jacket is not a vowel, so we would say a jacket. We don't say, I want to buy an jacket. We say, I want to buy a jacket. So this question here has tested the rule of an versus a lot. And if you're still somewhat confused, don't worry. Check out the course that I've mentioned. It is free and it will cover all of these rules in depth with a half an hour long video for each of the rules with many more examples. So now, moving on to the multiple choice questions, which are more straightforward and more simple than the fill in the blank questions. Whereas fill in the blank questions tested your understanding of both the rules and the information in the handbook, as well as grammar and spelling rules, the multiple choice questions only test your understanding of the information and the rules. So you just have to be able to memorize the content and remember it to answer these questions. So the first example we're going to look at is this one. It says dog aid, assistance in disability dogs are for. What are they for? Are they for physically disabled young people, adults and children with hearing impairments, or physically disabled adults? Okay, we're talking about dog aid, assistance in disability dogs. This information is in the handbook in section 8. So section 8 in the topic of assistance dogs. So if we come down, it shows us all the different types of dogs: guide dogs, hearing dogs, dog aid. So this is the one that we were interested in. Dog aid, assistance in disability, are for physically disabled adults. So answer is physically disabled adults. Next question. Which details should you include when recording an incident? Select 3 answers. This information is covered in the handbook in section 4, which is about staying safe, under the topic of risk of violence. And we can see it says, when you are recording an incident, try and include the following details: when and where, information about the attacker, whether the attacker was one of your passengers. So there's a whole list. There's about 10 items here. We have to select 3 correct ones. So we can see time and location was mentioned here. What else? Information about the attacker is mentioned here. And whether the attacker was one of your passengers. That's also mentioned here. So those are the 3 correct ones. So as you can see, the trick to answering these multiple choice questions is to memorize the content, the rules and the information that's in the handbook. The handbook is free and anybody can access it. However, the handbook is very long. It's 50 pages of just text, which is not the easiest thing to go through and memorize without any other help. Our online course makes it a lot easier. First of all, it breaks down all of the different sections into small, digestible, bite-sized topics. And at the end of each topic, you then have a quiz which you can take that will test you on the information in that topic. And that way you'll be able to tell whether you've learnt the information or not. You can also see the correct answers to those questions and repeat them as many times as you wish. You'll have loads of photos and images throughout the course to help you with your learning, as well as being able to hover over the keywords to understand their meaning so that you can make sure you've understood everything in the lesson. So let's go on to the next question. This one asks, what should you do with your PHV driver's badge? Wear it at all times when working, unless you are exempt. Hang it in your car so it can be seen by your passengers. Store it at home in a safe place. Now, one thing I want to point out here is when it comes to multiple choice questions, do not think about what is logical or what makes sense to you, because sometimes, there are things that may make sense to you. So in this question, hanging it in your car so it can be seen by your passengers actually makes a lot of sense. Because if you hang it in your car, the passengers who are sat in the back, they'll be able to see your driver's badge. Whereas if you were wearing it, it's around your neck, they can't see it. So is it much good there? But remember, multiple choice questions, as with any questions in the assessment, do not test what you think makes sense or what you think is logical, but it tests the rules in the handbook and your understanding of them. And in the handbook, the rule regarding your driver's badge is that it should be worn at all times when you're working, unless you are exempt. So remember, don't go with what you think is correct or what makes sense to you, but go with exactly what's stated in the handbook. Next question. When can you use your mobile phone as a driver? When stopped at red lights, when stopped in traffic, anytime you are parked, or when parked with your engine off. This is another one. So it might be very tempting to think, you know what, you can use it anytime you are parked, but that's not good enough. You have to make sure that you're parked and your engine is off, and this is exactly what's stated in the handbook. What does a bus stop clearway look like? Now, for those of you who haven't gone through the handbook, you may not be familiar with this. What is a bus stop clearway? A bus stop clearway is a wide line that is always by the curb. So remember, it's not away from the curb, it's by the curb. The bus stop clearway essentially is telling drivers that you cannot stop at the bus stop. There are some bus stops indeed that you are allowed to stop to pick up and drop off, as long as they do not have a clearway. You should still avoid trying to do so if you have other options, but you are permitted to stop if you need to on those bus stops. But if a bus stop has a clearway, which is a wide yellow or red line by the curb, then under no circumstances can you stop there to pick up or drop off. Here's another question. At what times should a PHV be insured? At what times? Okay, so that should immediately tell us there's more than one time, and it tells us to select two answers. So what are the two correct answers? So if we refer to the rules in the handbook, in this case, section 2, under the topic of insurance, we can see that every PHV must have higher reward insurance, and the policy must be valid when the vehicle is licensed, that's one of the times, and the other time is at all times when the vehicle is being used as a PHV. So now let's look at the answers. So when the vehicle is licensed and when the vehicle is being used as a PHV. Those are the two answers that were in the handbook. Next question. Ride-sharing passengers can become vulnerable to crime if other passengers learn what about them? Okay, select two answers. So this information is covered in section 10, which is ride-sharing, and we see here that there are a list of things which if other passengers learn about passengers in ride-sharing, then they may become vulnerable. Okay, what is ride sharing? Ride sharing, if you don't know, is essentially Uber Pool, which we know is not in effect anymore, but ride sharing is when you have more than one passengers who don't know each other, who decide to share a private hire vehicle along the same route towards their destination. So if one of them finds out the home address of another passenger, where they work, their daily routines, or whether they live alone or not, then that passenger can become at risk, potentially. So the answers here, two correct answers, is whether they live alone or not, and their home address. Now the final type of question that you need to know about for the assessment is the reading and understanding question. You're going to get about 2 to 4 of these questions in the test. The way this question works is you're given a paragraph, a number of sentences to read, and then you have to select a correct answer. You're expected to understand the content of the paragraph. The paragraph can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about the information in the handbook necessarily. It can be, but in the past, students have got paragraphs about other things, like COVID-19, like lockdown, like tax processes. So let's take a look at this example question. A driver can only get permission to not carry wheelchairs for medical reasons. If a driver cannot carry out the duties of Section 165 of the Equality Act because the driver's poor health or fitness makes it impossible or unreasonable, an exemption certificate may be given to the driver. Question: which of the following statements is correct? So, in your assessment, you have the paragraph, and then after that, you're followed up with a question. The question usually will say which of the following statements is correct, but sometimes, instead, it can say which of the following statements is not correct. So make sure you always double check what the question says and answer accordingly. Now let's take a look at the options we have. Designated wheelchair accessible PHV drivers are never exempt from carrying a wheelchair. Designated wheelchair accessible PHV drivers can be exempt from carrying wheelchairs if they are tired. Or designated wheelchair accessible PHV drivers can be exempt from carrying wheelchairs for medical reasons. So which of these three is true? Well, there was no mention of drivers being tired, making them exempt, and also it's not true, based on the information, that drivers are never exempt. There is definitely one type of exemption, and that's for poor health or fitness, which are medical reasons. For those of you who want to practice more questions, you can access 400 questions and answers with the official format on our online course. I will leave the link down below in the description. The online course gives you access for up to 4 weeks, and it includes a mock test as well with the same software that you'll have in the assessment. It of course covers all of the handbook, and there are some free questions that you can try before signing up. At the moment, it is on a limited time offer of $39.99, and if you have any technical issues with the course, we will give your money back within 30 days. Finally, if you need any more help or have questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our WhatsApp number is there on the screen. You can also click the link below to contact us via WhatsApp. Feel free to call us on our office number 2, which is 02039657202. We run one-to-one training, online and in person, for the SERU assessment, for the B1 speaking and listening test as well as topographical assessments too. We have tutors that cover a wide range of languages, including Bangla, Punjabi, Urdu, Pashto, Farsi, Dari, and other languages too. So if you need any help with your assessments, please get in touch with us at any time. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to subscribe and watch the other videos that we've already uploaded, as well as the videos that we're going to be releasing soon to help you in all of your assessments.